What's up everyone, this is Danny from Plug and Play, and today we are going to be going over our brand new After Effects tool, Layout. Layout is the perfect companion for all After Effects users and provides several functions for easily adjusting the layout of your layers. With Layout, you can easily align selections, distribute spacing, change anchor points, arrange layers into grids, and even collages. Some call this the missing align panel from After Effects, and after using it, you won't want to go back. Layout is part of our brand new After Effects tool platform, Plug and Play. We offer a growing catalog of extremely premium After Effects tools, project files, and assets. Head on over to plugandplay.app for a free 2-week trial to try out all of our products that are sure to enhance your AE experience. With that being said, let's dive into Layout. Let's jump right in by going over Layout's UI. When you open up the tool, you will first be presented with this main panel, which includes the most frequently used features of Layout. There's also this navigation bar, which allows you to switch between the main panel, grid, collage, and then also a settings panel. You'll notice that if we hover over these buttons, they will reveal additional features and tooltips for what that individual button does. Throughout the tool, there's many of these different input boxes, and we can change these values by just clicking and dragging, or also just clicking into it and entering in whatever we want. Back in the main panel of the tool, you will find 3 different features that makes creating beautiful designs in After Effects so much easier. We have the Align Selection tool, which will allow us to align an entire selection to the composition. We have the Distribute Spacing tool, which will create spacing between our different selected groups. And then we also have an Anchor Point tool for easily adjusting the anchor point of our selected layers. As you can see here, I'm working on this layout splash image and things are all over the place. They're not aligned, they're not distributed correctly. So let's quickly use Layout to fix up this design. I'm going to go ahead and start with these icons down here, and we can start with the distribute spacing. So I'll just go ahead and leave this at 100 pixels. Click the distribute horizontal button, and this is going to add 100 pixels worth of spacing between these different layers. Now, as you can see, I have not only an icon layer, but I also have a background shape layer as well. And Layout's smart enough to realize that these should be grouped and treated as one so that the distribution is happening between these different groups. Now, if I go ahead and select all of these layers and then click the Align to Center, it's going to align that entire selection to the center of the composition. If we were to use the Align tool in After Effects to do this and clicked on this Align to Comp Horizontal, it's going to align all of the selected layers to the center of the composition, but that's not what we want. We want to maintain this group and align that entire group to the center of the composition. And of course, we can align this to the left or the right or the bottom or the top. It doesn't really matter, but regardless, it's going to maintain that group's position and move them all relative to each other. Let's go ahead and do the same thing for these text layers here. We'll add 100 pixels of spacing. Make sure that those are centered. Let's go ahead and click on this layout shape layer, which has these masks on it, which are used to create this kind of corner effect here. Now, if I go ahead and align this to the top, you'll see that we are maintaining the bounds of the mask here, which is probably not what we want to do in this instance. So we can head on over to the settings tab, detoggle this use mask bounds, head back over to the main panel, and now when we align this to the top, it's going to not consider the mask bounds and just the layer bounds. So I'll go ahead and undo that, set that back to be centered with the layout text. Let's just select all of these. Now we have the layout text layer selected, its background shape layer, all of these different text labels, and the icons as well. And let's set the spacing to be, let's call it 90 pixels, and then go ahead and click this distribute vertically button. This is going to add 90 pixels of spacing between all of these different groups here. So we can go ahead and now select all of these again, and let's just center it all inside of our composition, both vertically and horizontally. And just like that, we've cleaned up this design, added proper spacing, and aligned everything perfectly to our composition. Great, now let's pop on over to a new composition, and I'm going to create some of these rectangle shape layers. Duplicate this 4 more times, and then add some spacing between all of them. Let's just duplicate this entire selection 3 more times as well. Move that down. Okay. And then let's add some spacing vertically to all of these, and then center them up in the composition. And now let's go ahead and I'm going to offset these by a few pixels. Go ahead and move these over a little bit. And now if we go ahead, select these all and add the horizontal distribution spacing, you'll see that we get all of these different kind of spacing between each individual layer. We're no longer maintaining those columns or groups, but if we go back and head on over to the settings panel, we have this group tolerance slider. So let's go ahead and increase this group tolerance to be 40 pixels. And now if we go ahead and distribute this spacing, we're still maintaining the groups and the columns that we have set up here because these shape layers fall within that group tolerance of 40 pixels. So even though they're a little bit offset, we're still treating them as a group because they are within that group tolerance. Now, if we go ahead and change this back to be 10, go back to our main panel here and then add that horizontal distribution again, you can see that we're back to all of these different layers being treated as their own group. The grid tool in Layout makes it stupid easy to arrange your selected layers into a grid. So I have 24 different logos from some of the top brands that utilize our tools, and I'm gonna go ahead and arrange these into a grid. These are all different sizes and dimensions, and manually creating a grid in After Effects using these would take forever. But with the layout tool, it's just one click. So I'll go ahead, select all of these different layers, and then let's just click on this horizontal grid button. Layout is going to automatically resize and position all of these different layers so that we have a grid with 5 different rows. So if we go ahead and click on the vertical button, then we're going to have 5 different columns and have X amount of rows as well. Let's go ahead and go through some of the other grid parameters that we can play around with. So this first one is going to be this realign to bounds of objects. When disabled, Layout goes ahead and creates all of these different cells based on the size that we have set down here, and then places all of our different layers inside of each cell with margin between each cell. But if we have this enabled, we're not going to be placing the margin between each cell. We're going to be placing the margin between each of the bounds of the layers. So I'll go ahead and create another vertical grid here. And as you can see, now these are much tighter because we're no longer spacing between the cell bounds. We're using the layer bounds instead. I'll go ahead and disable that again. And let's talk about this keyframe button. So when enabled, this is going to add keyframes to the position and scale and rotation, if necessary, of our different layers. And let's click on this horizontal grid. And as you can see, we now have keyframes for the position and scale of those different layers. Great. So next to that, we have this matte button. And when enabled, this is going to add a matte layer to all of our different grid cells. We can have either a circle matte or a rectangular matte. I'll go ahead and click on rectangular, and then let's go ahead and do another horizontal grid here. As you can see, we're placing all of these different shape layers in each grid cell, and this is going to add a matte to all of the different images or layers that we're placing into a grid. Now this works really well with the scale type toggle, and this allows us to decide how we want the layers to scale up inside of each grid cell. So by default, it's set to fit. This means that the layer is going to scale up so that it completely fits inside of our different grid cells. But if we set this to be fill, and again, have that matte layer on as well, we can go ahead and select all of these. Let's go ahead and do another horizontal grid here. And now, as you can see, we have the image or the layer filling up the bounds of that grid cell, and it's matted so that we can get a very clean looking effect here. This is super useful for images where you don't know that every single image is going to have the same dimensions, but you still want them to all equally fill the grid cells. So we'll go ahead, undo that, and let's talk about this rotation effect. When enabled, this allows us to add some random rotation to all of our different grids. Let's set the random rotation to be something like 20 here, or 21. We can go ahead and select all of these matte layers, delete them real quick. and select all of our layers again, do another horizontal grid, and now we have some random rotation. Below that, we have some slider inputs for the size of the grid and also the margin between each grid cell. This is really apparent with the mat on. We can set this random rotation back to be 0. And let's go ahead and set the size to be 200 pixels wide by 100 pixels tall. And then we'll increase the margin to be, let's call it 20 pixels each. Select all of our layers again, hit the horizontal grid button, and now all of our grid cells are 200 pixels wide and 100 pixels tall with 20 pixels of margin between each grid cell. Let's just center these in our composition here. Great. Layout makes it really easy to rearrange these different grid cells as well. So if I go ahead and set this back to be fit, we'll get rid of the matte layer and then turn off that rotation as well. I'll set this back to be 100. And then let's go ahead and just rearrange these all into a normal grid here. And then we'll also get rid of these matte layers as well. Cool. So maybe I don't want this Apple logo to be right here. I can go ahead and drag it where this Vistaprint logo is, swap these out. I can just roughly position them. Maybe I want the F1 logo here, Epic Games here, and I want AMC somewhere over here as well. We'll go ahead, select those all again, hit the grid button, and now we've just readjusted all those different positions. Really easy to like change up the ordering of our layers here. Just roughly drag the layers position to where you want it to be. Click that grid tool and it's going to automatically align those to the new grid position here. Go ahead. Super easy. So last but not least, we have the collage tool. And this is used for creating beautiful collages in After Effects from a target layer and then many selected layers. So in this composition, I have several images of various fast food logos, including McDonald's, Subway, Arby's, and Wendy's. And I also have about 400 different icon PNGs. If I zoom in here, you can see all the different ones here. But let's go ahead and explore how this collage tool works. So I'm going to go ahead and get rid of this example composition here, and I'm going to go ahead and select all of my different icons. Now I'm going to go up to the Collage panel, set the target layer to be 1, and that's because McDonald's is our first logo here. And then let's go ahead and just click this collage button. Awesome. We've arranged the position, the scale, and the color in order to get this outcome that represents the original target layer. Let's go through some of the various collage inputs that we can utilize here. So the first one is going to be the layer order. This is going to decide which layers go where in the target layers circles. So as you can see, we have different options for random, nearest, reverse X, reverse Y, orbit X, and orbit Y. And this is really useful when we want to create an animation from our different collages. I'm going to go to frame 30 here, or 1 second. We're going to select all of our layers again. And this time I'm going to set the layer order to be reverse X. Leave the target image at 1, which is the McDonald's layer, and go ahead and hit apply collage. Sweet, so that just finished. And as you can see, we now have the X position kind of being reversed here for this animation. So it's gone through and it's looked at that target layer again, packed it full of circles, but now it's assigned all of our selected layers the circle positions that are kind of opposite of where they are currently on the X axis. Now we can go ahead and play around with some of these other different layer ordering options here, such as reverse Y, which basically does the opposite of reverse X on the Y axis. And then there's also things like orbit X, which gives more of like an orbiting effect versus just a straight reversing effect. And there's also orbit Y and nearest, but I'll let you all play around with that on your own time. Cool. So next to that, we have a toggle for maintaining the layer bounds. When enabled, it allows us to maintain the bounds of the alpha pixels from our target layer. So that's why when I turn on this McDonald's logo, you can see that there's no icons extending past the actual logo. But if we had this disabled, the icons would still be placed within inside of the McDonald's logo. However, they might extend beyond the bounds of the actual actual logo itself here. Below that, we have the keyframe toggle, and this is very similar to the grid option, but in Collage, it allows us to generate multiple keyframes. So that's why you see we have multiple sets of these keyframes generated here, because I have the quantity set to 2 and the spacing set to 120 frames. This is really useful when you're creating like a looping animation and you want to have a collage start at the beginning of the animation and then end in the same position and scale at the end of the animation. Just like in the grid tool, we have this matte toggle, and this allows us to add a matte to all of our different layers that we're placing inside of the target image. And we can have that be circle or square again. Next to that, we have the fill button. And when this is toggled, we're actually going to be pulling the color data from the target layer and utilizing that on all of our selected icons or layers by applying a fill effect to them, or we can add a tint effect if we're using images that we just want to tint to a certain color. Then next to that, we have the same layer scaling that we have in grid, which allows us to control how the layer is scaled up inside of each circle. Right now it's set to fill, but of course you can set it to stretch or fit or none if you want to maintain the scale. Next to that, we have random rotation. This is the same again as the grid effect, and it allows us to add some random rotation to all of our selected layers. Below that, we have the minimum and maximum. This allows us to control the minimum and maximum size that each layer can be inside of the target layer. So as you can see, I have the minimum set to 2 pixels right now, and then I also have the maximum size set to 20 pixels. Below that, we have margin, and this allows us to add some margin to each of these selected layers when they are packed inside of our target layer. So now that I have this all set up, I'm gonna go ahead and decrease the keyframe quantity to 1. We can leave the time at 1 second. I'm going to select all of my layers again. And this time, let's set the target image to be layer number 2, which is the Subway logo. Sweet, I'll go ahead and click on the collage icon. But first, let's go ahead and crank up this margin to be like 10. As you can see, we just got this notification that says there's not enough circles, and that only 126 out of the 423 layers were successfully packed inside of our target layer. We can either continue with only packing that 126 layers, or we can hit cancel. If we hit cancel, we get this notification that says try decreasing the minimum and maximum radius and then also the margin. So I'm gonna do just that. Let's set this back down to be 2, hit the collage button again, and let's see if this will pack enough circles to fill all of our selected layers. Okay, so again, we got the same notification. I'm gonna drop down this margin to be 1, and let's bring down the maximum to be 18, and hopefully this will work. Okay, it looks like we're still missing 3 layers, and let's just drop this maximum down a little bit more here and put the margin at 0. Sweet, so that just finished, and as you can see, I accidentally left on the matte button, but that doesn't matter. We've gone ahead and placed all of our different selected icons inside of our Subway logo, and looks pretty sweet. I mean, it looks pretty solid. As you can see, we have about 400 different icons packed inside of here. But now that I've gone ahead and done that, let's actually delete all of these different matte layers. And let's head on over to the 2-second mark and do another collage utilizing our third logo here, which is going to be Arby's. So we'll go ahead and turn off that matte toggle. And let's change up, let's say that we want our maximum to be a little bit higher here, maybe 28. With 0 margin, and we're going to have layer number 3 be our target, which is going to be the Arby's. So go ahead and click the collage button. All right, that one just finished. And as you can see, we got the Arby's logo here, looking pretty solid. Let's go ahead and go to 3 seconds and then do the last one. We're going to do the Wendy's logo. Real quick, go ahead, change the target layer to be 4. Let's go ahead and hit the collage button. All right, sweet. So now that we got the Wendy's logo all collaged up, we can go ahead and select all of our different layers again. And let's just pre-compose these. We'll go ahead, right click on that composition, go to time, hit enable time remapping. And then we'll go to the 1 second mark, add a keyframe, go to the 2 second mark, add a keyframe, 3 second mark, and then the 4 second mark as well. And now let's just go ahead and add some easing to these. I'll go ahead and use curves here. Maybe, let's see, maybe a 47% ease. Let's go ahead, hit apply. Cool. And now we've got a really nice looping collage logo animation. Thanks so much for watching, and I hope by now you have a solid understanding of just how versatile this tool is. Layout remains a daily driver for me, and I've already used it on most projects I've touched to quickly button up any design. As I mentioned before, Layout is a part of our brand new After Effects tool platform, Plug and Play. Subscribe and get access to our growing catalog of premium After Effects tools, project files, and assets. We are adding new products every single month and growing our premium catalog. Head over to plugandplay.app, subscribe, and get access to all of it. Thanks so much for watching. This has been Danny with Plug and Play.